Taking advantage of its dominance in the legislature, Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, passed the so-called anti-infiltration bill, claiming that it will prevent illegal campaign contributions, the staging of political events, the spread of misinformation, and other acts that could affect Taiwan's elections, all the work of the government. What are the DPP's real considerations behind this bill? What does this bill mean for cross-Strait relations? And how will it affect the upcoming Taiwan leadership contest? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by He Jing, attorney of Anjie Law Firm, and Anna Tangen, current affairs commentator. Via telephone, we'll cross over to Joanna Lei, former Taiwan legislator. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Welcome to Dialogue. First of all, Jing, what do you think of the timing? I mean, only 34 days within such a short period of time, the DPP-dominated legislature quickly passed the anti-infiltration bill. What do you think of the hurry itself?
I think it probably serves two purposes. The first one is apparently trying to deter any of the mainland-based the Taiwan business people to go back to Taiwan to cast a vote. I think that's a very clear intention. If you're looking at the bill itself,
but actually that accusation is allegedly based on the assumption that these Taiwanese investors are very much pro-KMT. But to my knowledge, these investors from Taiwan, these entrepreneurs from Taiwan could also have cast their votes in favor of the DPP.
Well, at least they want to deter those ones that who might want to cast vote in favor of KMT. It's not always like 100% they're going to be in favor of a DPP. So the statutes definitely says that, well, if you are really under the instruction or commissioned by or funded by the so-called infiltration sources to do the campaign donation or to be part of the campaign, and it's all illegal. And if anyone actually who's in favor of the KMT and it's based in mainland China, they're probably going to think twice whether they should fly back to Taiwan this time to cast votes.
In sharp contrast, and I wonder if you have followed the New Year speech by President Xi Jinping, in which he didn't mention a single word about Taiwan. And that was a big surprise for those who followed his New Year's address, because previously, I mean, we should have at least expressed some goodwill gestures to the Taiwanese compatriots. But this time around, and last year, nothing was said about Taiwan as well. So that means, in the understatement, the mainland authorities have been pretty cautious, very quiet about the accusation that we might have stepped in to interfere with the elections.
You're in the midst of a PR war. And that's literally what this is. She rushed this thing through because her trump card is, literally, that's a pun intended, is to politicize this and make it all about China. So President Xi Jinping did not want to politicize it. He did not want to give any excuse. Any mention, good or bad, would have been seen either as pandering to the Taiwanese people or threatening to the Taiwanese people. In terms of action, though, China has been very, very active. They've been encouraging young people from Taiwan with additional benefits if they wish to come to China and start a career or start a business. They've reduced the paperwork that's necessary and actually passed a preservation of Taiwanese economic rights here on the mainland, so that they can, in fact, do more things, and actually will have an advantage over their mainland competitors.
Joanna, what do you think of the considerations of the DPP?
Well, certainly, as your commentators have mentioned earlier, there are probably three major considerations. One is, in this upcoming general election, Taiwan has used threats from mainland as one of her major appeal to local Taiwanese, especially to the youngest generation who had no historical recollection of a time when cross-straits are really hostile. So that's one. The second one is probably to send a further signal to the United States. As we understand, U.S. have asked all major candidates to display or demonstrate clearly its mainland policy. especially amid the U.S.-China trade war and all these other potential conflicts. So the second one is to clearly demonstrate her mainline stance against any potential quote-unquote threats to Taiwan's sovereignty. The third one is to bring a guideline to future cross-strait relations. And I think that's the most stupid one, because once that guideline was drawn, people will understand in her second term, if she did get elected, the second term will not see an improvement of cross-strait relations. And that will send chills to people, especially local businessmen, as well as people who are operating across Taiwan Strait.
Joanna, why do you think the KMT boycotted the deliberations among the legislators to approve this Anti-Infiltration Act?
That is because the KMT simply doesn't have enough votes to boycott or block it. This bill particularly went through a expedient process. It didn't go through the second reading in the committee. In the committee, there are enough votes from both sides so KMT can stall it or block it. But it went straight to the expedited process, going directly to the second reading and to the floor. So there are no chance for KMT to block it as you have simply not enough votes. So as a result, KMT showed a very clear stance. None of the KMT legislators were present. So if DPP wants to do something against the will of the people and against the interest of the people in Taiwan, then you do it. So this is like a clear demonstration of, the blood is in your hand. We have nothing to do with it. If people are hurt or people are angry about this particular bill, then go to DPP legislator and do not vote for them come January 11th. So that's a very clear campaign tactic for KMT legislators not to present at the time of the voting.
Thank you very much. Jane, what do you think of the immediate response from the State Council Information Office? The State Council Taiwanese Affairs Office, which accused the DPP of exercising green terror.
I think that's actually directly pointed to the heart of the whole consideration of the DPP. Actually points to at the biggest the consequences of this bill. This is to create this green terror. I think the whole purpose, the biggest purpose of this the bill is to create this terror against this Chinese mainland-based the Taiwan business people, right? To deter them from coming back to cast votes. I think another thing consideration might be, okay, as I have heard, is that maybe Tsai trying to be prepared for like any surprise outcome. In case she lost the election, she might using this bill to say, hey, someone, like some quote-unquote infiltration sources have impact on this one, and then we should ask the government to nullify the election and even using the law enforcement to go after or to prosecute or conduct some sort of investigation to delay the entire process. That might be another thing that
I think that's a little far-fetched. The polls are running very much in her favor. She's had a boom from the Hong Kong situation and also the U.S. Trade war, because there's been a lot of repatriation of dollars going back, businesses going back from mainland to Taiwan, and companies that are going there. So she has a very temporary economic boom that's going on. You see that reflected in the trade things. But the difficulty here, and this is where I agree, long term, 70% of Taiwan's economy is based on exports. And those markets, the biggest market is China. And without that, it's not going to be replaced by the U.S. U.S. Trade was up by 23%, but trade with China, exports to China were down 32%. You start looking at the gravity of those, and over time, you're going to see that it's a no-win situation. So she's fighting economic gravity. She has not had a proactive economic policy. She has simply just been trying to ride the tails and use emotion and this whole thing. Because remember, before the Hong Kong situation, all right, she was faring very badly in the polls. She had just gotten killed in the local elections, where it seemed that they were on par for a complete change. She wasn't even going to run as prime minister, and then lo and behold, this thing with Hong Kong happens, and now she's in the front seat.
Well, I don't think that the game is really actually already set. Okay, I think there are actually still debate that will be the actual outcome. People might thought, well, the Hong Kong situation has lots of impact, and the young people all like her. But from what I heard, that the game is not over yet.
I haven't talked to many people in Hong Kong. Maybe Joanna would know better.
Look, Joanna, our guest speaker here, lawyer He Jing, said this anti-infiltration bill might target those Taiwanese entrepreneurs, the whole Taiwanese business community, which is based in most cities, I mean, many of the cities here in the mainland. Are you convinced that this big army of Taiwanese entrepreneurs who have been doing business in the mainland may have been prevented from going back to Taiwan, cast their votes, which allegedly might support the KMT?
Well, I certainly think that a lot of people felt this is a really stupid tactic. If its purpose is to deter people from going back to vote, it will have the exact opposite effect, for people to fear for their continuation of holding the reign of all the government. But it is important to point out that the game is not a foregone conclusion at all. If you go to any of the mass rallies, there hasn't been any rally this warm, this hot in Taiwan in the past 18 to 20 years. So Han Kuo-yu, while his number is not shown in the public opinion polls clearly, it is very clear that if you go to any of the mass rallies, you'll see extremely strong grassroots support. And that is also why Taiwan to this date has not held even one mass rally at all. But I want to point out another thing. This anti-infiltration law actually violates extremely fundamental principles of our statutory legal systems. It violated the principle of certainty and the principle of foreseeability, created room for arbitrary and selective enforcement of any government's policy. So once that is set in place, people actually got into an extreme state of fear. And a fear tactic is not a very positive one for a general election. Fear tactic is something that you do after you get power and you have people under your control and you have no one can protest against this government enforcement. But to do it ahead of the campaign has got to have some other reasons. And that is why most people locally believe that there is a clear U.S. involvement in here. It is a clear signal sent to the United States on Taiwan's resistance, quote unquote, of mainland meddling in our election. And that will coincide with the National Defense Authorization Act's requirement for the United States to support Taiwan's vivid democracy and also to provide reports to the Congress.
Overseas Chinese are allegedly very proud of the pilot democracy in Taiwan, yet ironically, the very first thought that crossed my mind, Joanna, upon hearing the approval of the anti-infiltration bill was that the freedom of speech and freedom of the media in Taiwan could be compromised. So do you share the same concern, Joanna? Because you are talking with me on the phone and you might be accused or charged with the crimes subverting the sovereignty or endangering the security of Taiwan. I mean, do you share the same fears?
Absolutely. I hear the fears from academic, business community, as well as young people and religious groups all around Taiwan. And that is why I feel that this is a very stupid campaign tactic. And to do something this stupid, there has got to be an underlying or underpinning reason for Taiwan to do that. But it is also important to know that people have enjoyed close to 20 years, well, at least 15 years of very free and open exchanges across Taiwan Strait. And that experience will carry a long way. It is not easy for the DPP government to scare people into not exchanging or not communicating with mainland.
Thank you so much, Joanna. You are watching Dialogue with He Jing, Anna Tangen, and Joanna Lei Chen. We are discussing why the Taiwanese authorities, particularly the pro-secession political force, the DPP, which is in power, quickly approved the anti-infiltration bill through their dominance of the legislature. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us, please. Back. Now, and I wonder if you could go back and review what had happened many years ago when Chen Shui-bian, former leader of Taiwan, was accused of staging a mysterious gunshot incident. It's called the March the 19th gunshot, and that's the mysterious gunshots helped him win the elections because he accused the pro-mainland forces of trying to stage an assassination attempt at him and his assistant, Lu Xiulian, who were riding in the same car with him during the rally.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem with democracies. It's a very emotional vote when people come to it. And he was able to, he came from behind in that particular case with this, quote, incident. Has never been fully investigated or cleared exactly what happened. And all of a sudden he was in front. And he was now, subsequently he was arrested, charged, and convicted for, for fraud in office. And that was the end of that, or so we thought. The idea of dirty tricks in politics is not new. We've seen it. I was just looking at something involving Richard Nixon, and it continues to go on. We have the same types of things going on in the U.S. Congress, where the Senate is supposed to be impartial, but the leader of the Senate says, "I'm going to cooperate with the person who's being accused." So right now, you're seeing the emergence of supposed strong men who are offering simplistic answers, and they will use any means to get what they want. I do think that she is trying to use this purely as a PR tactic. She wants to wrap herself in the flag and say, I'm the only person who's protecting you from the evil mainland. And this is just such nonsense. She doesn't have a plan. She has one plank in her entire campaign, and that is anti-China. And that's why she's doing it. It is, yes, I agree, it's a gamble, but will the electorate of Taiwan wake up in time to cast their votes for something more reasonable, or will they stick with her? The economics say that they might stay with her simply because there's been this temporary blip in the Taiwanese economy.
Let me go back to Joanna. A major of American literature, I still remember what Mark Twain said in his short story, Running for Governor, and he accused and discredited the American democracy with similar wording like smear campaigns. And do you think this anti-infiltration bill could be compared in parallel to what Mark Twain said in his short novel, very cynical sentiments about the integrity of democracy? I'd like to have your thoughts and sentiments.
Well, absolutely. Lots of people are thinking, what is democracy without freedom and without liberty? Taiwan is moving into what Zachariah termed illiberal democracy in the last 3 years. With all the laws and bills Taiwan passed, our constitutional rights in terms of property, of congregation, of political participation have all been challenged. And now the most fundamental freedom of travel and exchanges, freedom of speech, are also going to be challenged severely by this anti-infiltration bill. So we are moving into a democracy without liberty. Illiberal democracy is the current state. In addition to that, the anti-infiltration law actually moved Taiwan into a McCarthyism, where your ideas or your original inspiration can be challenged simply because you're different. And this McCarthyism, whether it's called the Green Terror or not, is an extremely dangerous sign for any free and open society. So I'm afraid to say that Taiwan is deteriorating very rapidly into illiberal democracy.
Actually, I really liked what Joanna said, and I visited Taipei 2 months ago, November, in Taipei. I was talking to various friends who are actually quite involved in some of the work with the young people. The message they send to the young generation is that they really have to stand up to protect the liberal democracy in Taiwan. I think this anti-infiltration bill might actually waking up the young people. People have the stereotype that, hey, younger people may be like the Taiwan better, but just listening to what Joanna said, what's really going on might actually have the young people who really have the heart to realize what the Tsai is doing.
What do you think of the frail, weak mindset of the KMT, Anna? because Han Kuo-yu, the sole candidate of the KMT camp, accused DPP of using a bomb whose fuse is completely in the hands of the DPP. Do you think public opinion survey is one thing, the real and actual results of the campaign might be quite another? If you go back to examine the results of the local elections that we had last September, and surprisingly, the KMT won big.
Yeah, but that was based on economics, and that's what we don't have in this particular election. The GDP numbers are actually above where they projected, although if you start looking at the numbers in November, they had a very nice increase in terms of exports. However, at the same time, it was 3.2%. At the same time, future orders were down 3.5%. So that means within 2 to 3 months, you're going to see a downturn in the economy. You know, with 70% of everything depending on exports, what if there is a recession, right? How is Taiwan protected? Where can they go, right? Is the U.S. going to come forward and take it when they're having their own issues economically? The answer is absolutely not. Tsai Ing-wen has nowhere to go. As I said, she's fighting economic gravity. 10% of her workforce works in China. An enormous amount of their infrastructure and investment is in China. Some is coming back to Taiwan, but it's mostly due to the fact that the U.S. is exerting pressure and may be doing this purposely. This is a 2-for-1. They're getting Taiwan activated at the same time as they're pushing little business. But there are no American businesses going to Taiwan right now. So you can be assured that the long-term...
Let me raise one follow-up question, and let me go back to Joanna for her comments on the alleged intervention from the United States. Actually, one after another, bills were passed by the lawmakers in the D.C. For example, the Taiwan Travel Act, as well as the U.S.-Taiwan Affairs Special Envoy Act. Now, these documents, these bills were all said to be approved to aim at influencing Taiwan and the elections in Taiwan. What do you think of the role of the American Institute in Taiwan, Joanna?
Well, I think of the 20 years that I'm back in Taiwan, this year the U.S. involvement or intervention is as blatant as ever been. Especially all those things you mentioned, all the new bills that have been passed in Washington, as well as in the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA 2020, it specified that the U.S. Director of National Intelligence will report to the Congress 45 days after our election, A, China's interference in this Taiwan general election, and 2, U.S. efforts to disrupt those activities. And by the second, it means that U.S. is currently making certain actions or activities to disrupt any potential mainline involvement. So I can see as clear as in my palm that all these activities are connected, including in the NDAA 2020 is a lot of new discussions on military initiatives. So those gave Tsai Ing-wen her ammunitions in this current campaign, and that is also her campaign theme. That is, mainline is interfering with us and U.S. is supporting us, and as simple as that. Once they mentioned this potential fiasco of Wang Liqiang, a so-called spy, and that was clearly a mistake. So they now put an Anti-Infiltration Act again to emphasis on the same thing. That is, mainland is dangerous and threatening to us, and China and U.S. will protect us, conflict or thin.
Joanna, many observers in the mainland pointed out whether you call it a war of attrition or battles for the mind and heart of the younger generation in Taiwan, because obviously whatever we do across the Taiwan Strait, both sides, even Americans, aspire to win mind and heart of the younger generation. So let me know, can you brief us on the general mindset of the younger generation, be it in the green camp or the blue camp? For example, despite the sophistication of elites in the DPP, it seems the majority of the young people who support the independence of Taiwan are single-minded and simple-minded. They don't want any intervention. neither do they want an explicit intervention from the United States. They just want to be true to themselves. Is that true? Is this allegation true about the mentality of the younger generation?
Well, I actually see a one-sided public opinion expression from the younger generation, but I must emphasize that this is a one-sided expression because the cyber warfare is extremely tight this year. DPP has gone all out for the cyber warfare in leading the young generation who has no historical recollection and who has very little historical experience in terms of the U.S. mainland and Taiwan relationship, how they evolved over the years. So the young generation are easily led by the cyber warfare, and they have a single-sided expression. But this election will be about cohorts, whether there will be older cohorts, more voter cohorts voting, or younger cohorts voting. The younger cohorts are probably a foregone conclusion supporting DPP, but there are still a lot of people over 30 years old, and they are more experienced and probably have more diverse source of information, not just from the cyber warfare.
Thank you very much, Anna, for being with us. Welcome back. Jing and Anna, not long ago, the Taiwan authorities approved what is called the Intelligence Act and the Anti-Proxy Act. Both documents aim to deter those who are sympathetic with the mainland from, casting their votes in favor of the KMT. Now, there's no doubt that the Americans have had many proxies or have cultivated a strong voice of the proxies in favor of, a Taiwan-U.S. relationship. So, what do you think of this note of irony? I mean, do you think it is the United States that has helped shape the future of the cross-strait relations?
I think this is called a politics, right? This is always
political theater.
This is really the political theater that Americans is behind this, and trying to probably leverage all their pressure or the influence in Taiwan to gain the benefits in this the cross-strait relationship, and eventually make something advantageous to the U.S. when it comes to the trade negotiations with China.
The DPP has been accused by the mainland ever since Tsai Ing-wen, leader of Taiwan, took office 4 years ago. That the DPP refused to accept the One China principle, seriously undermining the political groundwork upon which serious dialogues have been conducted across the Taiwan Strait. Therefore, Anna, do you share this pessimistic sentiment that the PLA armed forces will therefore stand ready to really deter any pro-secession forces from getting close to Washington very quickly, so that the situation will be tipped quite in favor of what we call the pro-secession side?
I've said repeatedly, Taiwan is a red line. Any attempt to try to wrest it away from China will be met with armed force. There's no question about that. It's in your Constitution, and it's not going to be played with. So
it is indeed a dangerous red line that no one should cross at a defining moment of not only the cross-strait relations, but also very consequential ties between Washington and Beijing in the second decade of the 21st century. Thank you for being with us. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.